I get asked a lot to do an Adele makeup tutorial. I think it's one of the most requested. For me, the only way to do this is to ask the original artist, the person who created that look. Luckily, I happen to know Adele's makeup artist. His name is Michael Ashton, and he is not only incredibly talented, he's also a really lovely guy. Michael's been working with Adele for 9 years now, so right since the beginning of her career, doing her hair and makeup. And this is a really lovely example of a performer working with a makeup artist to really working together and collaborating to create a signature look. Now, I know Michael's got loads and loads of tips he wants to share with you. So without further ado, over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. Too kind. Hi, everyone. I feel absolutely privileged to be here today as a guest artist on Lisa's channel. I've followed her career since I first moved to London from New Zealand. So I'm here today to share with you one of my signature looks, which is lashes and liner, a look that I often do on my longtime client, Adele, who does have fantastic bone structure and beautiful almond-shaped eyes. Working with any client, it's always a collaborative process. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of my tips and tricks, my personal favorite products. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. So I'm just starting by prepping Lotte's skin using the Bioderma cleansing water, which just helps to remove any excess oil before we start using serums and moisturizers. So depending on a client's skin type will depend on the sort of prep that I use. But one of my favorite products is this Decleor rose oil, which really plumps the skin, eliminates any redness, and really just hydrates.
It smells amazing.
It's delicious, isn't it? The final product I always like to use before I start working on the eyes is Bobbi Brown Illuminating Balm, which has tiny, tiny reflective gold particles in it. And I do this before we start everything else so the product has time to really soak into the skin and do its job. But this gives a natural sort of strobing effect underneath any base that we're going to use. So now we're going to start working on Lotte's eyes. I always like to just brush the brow into a natural shape using a clear brow gel, just to help us give us a better idea of the shape. Then this is one of my go-to products. It's the MAC Eye Paint in Groundwork. Just close for me. So I like to apply all over the lid, right at the base of the lashes, coming up to where you'd sort of have your natural crease in the socket. So I just find this gives a little bit of added depth and acts as a really great base before we do any powder products. So a little bit underneath. And I go back in with the MAC 217 brush, look straight ahead, and really just soften out that line. Great, so now we're going to go in over the MAC Groundwork, the paint that we've got on the eye, using this beautiful Tom Ford eyeshadow palette called Nude Dip, mainly using the two lighter colours that we have here at the top of the palette. I'll be mixing the two lightest shades together, which have a sort of goldy bronzy hue, and really buffing them into the eyelid to create an expensive looking finish. I also like to always just bring it a little bit into this inner corner so that we get a natural reflection, which helps make the eye look a little bit more open. And then I like to finish using a slightly larger fluffy brush, look straight ahead, and really just blend that right up to the brow so you can't see where it starts or finishes. So now we're going to start working on Lotte's eyeliner. I personally like to apply the gel liner to the back of my hand first. It helps to dry it out a bit so that it's a little bit more workable. If you close for me. So I generally start by applying the eyeliner towards the middle inner corner of the eye, working outwards first, and then gradually building thickness. And this initial stage is just about getting the product on quickly. Look straight ahead. So we're not necessarily worrying too much about the shape. And close. So I like to bring it out just past the end of the natural lash line. And then what we'll do is we'll wing the liner at the very end once we get the thickness sorted. So we're going to go in, now that we've established the bulk of the line, we're going to go in and work in on that inner corner. So I like to really stretch out the eyelid to avoid any sort of creases, pop the brush as close as I can to the lash line, and really work it along to blend into the line that we've already established. Even though this liner, it is very black and quite opaque, you do need to keep going back over, revisiting, and straight ahead, and just build up that color density. So now I'm going to come in and just finish off the flick on this eyeliner. What I like to do is to start right at the root of the lashes, using a little bit more pressure on the brush so that we get a thicker line. And as I drag it outwards and upwards at a 45-degree angle towards her temple, just take a little bit of that pressure off so that you get a thinner, softer flick. So now that we've got the initial shape of the flick that we want, I'm just going to get Lotte to close her eyes and come back in and really just sharpen up the edge of that liner using the brush. And also a little bit underneath. And then if you have made a mistake or it needs to be a tiny bit sharper, I always have Bioderma water handy and these amazing little MUJI cotton tips. Look straight ahead and you can just sweep that across here and lift it up and out. And it actually helps to create that very fine drag to the liner at the end. So I'm coming back in now, again, using the gel liner to really build the thickness, the density on the outer edge of the liner, because we want it very dark, very dramatic. So I'm just working from the outer corner in towards the middle of the eye and just making it a little bit thicker so we get that added bit of drama. Now I'm going to go in and we're going to start applying the lashes. My favorite lash glue is the black duo glue. I always use this because I find that it dries matte and also because it's black it really helps to blend the false lashes into the natural lash line. So today I'm using a wispy style lash which is a little bit more wearable, but when I'm working with clients for the red carpet or performances, what I'll often do is sort of custom blend 2 or 3 different style lashes that can be close to me, that can be cut or, you know, layered upon to really give a full fluttering effect. So I just place the lash right at the root of Lotte's natural lashes, and then again using a little MUJI cotton tip, just coming in and you can just really press that right into the base. And before it dries, what I like to do is just using my finger, just lift that up and out to help give us a nice finish. So now that we've got the lashes on the base of our liner, I'm going to go in and start working with mascara. This is one of my favorite mascaras. It's the Dior Show Off in black. I personally like a mascara when it's a little bit older because it tends to dry out a bit more and I find that I can get the product on faster with a thicker application. I tend to start on the bottom lashes. So what I do is apply mascara again to the back of my hand, and I have a great little fan brush here, which I then use to do the bottom lashes. So if you look up for me, really working the product into the base of the lash line, and I find it almost gives you the look as if you've just smudged a bit of black eye kohl in there. If you do get any on your waterline, it's fine. We can go back in with a tip at the end and clean that out. But this is a bit of a slow build because you want to get it nice and thick at the base and then have it a little more feathery as you get to the end of the lashes. So now I'm really just making sure that we're blending Lotte's natural lashes into the false lashes that we've just applied. So the final stage to getting the perfect feline flick is what I like to call product cocktailing. So it's using, you know, 2 products together. Just close for me. So we use the gel liner to begin with, which gives us a fantastic base. Now I'm coming in with a liquid which is very thick. It almost feels a little bit like tar. But what it does is it just adds almost like a patent leather shine to the lid, to the liner, and really just gives it that extra intensity. And this brush is super fine, So what it means is as you've got rid of most of the product on the brush, you really can come out and just drag that line to the finest point. I think to finish off any eye look, it's really important to make sure that the brows are perfectly groomed. It doesn't always mean that they're completely filled in, but it does mean, you know, that they're in place, that they've got a sort of symmetrical shape. So I go in with a clear brow gel first, which I just find actually really helps, A, to put the hairs in place, but also it gives something for whether you're using an eye pencil or brow powders, it gives something for the product to adhere to. So starting on the inner corner, just using little fine strokes, get your initial shape in there. And if you ever do need to just tidy up the top of the brow, I like to go back in. You can just use a nice concealer brush with either a little bit of moisturizer, Bioderma, whatever you need. And you can just take that top line off just to make sure it's nice and clean. So once I've got the initial outline in with the brow pencil, I always go back in with a little brow brush like this and really just soften that out. We've filled Lotte's eyebrows quite a lot, but we still want it to always look soft. So the final step I always do when finishing brows is I like to go in and set with a matte eyeshadow. So I have this great palette of neutrals. I like to do a little mix of, you know, 3 or 4 colors just to get a bit of a custom blend. And then I just go in using, you know, it's a slightly rounded but flat bristled brush. And I just press the shadow on top of the pencil that we've just done. And I find by using this sort of brush rather than an angle brush or anything like that, it just gives you a much softer, blown out finish to the brow. So now we've finished working on Lotte's eyes, which I think are looking beautiful. We're going to go in, and this is one of the reasons that I always do eyes first. A, it tends to be a focus feature for me, but it's also that if you have any little mistakes, look up for me, or any drop down, you can just clean up quickly before moving on to doing your base. Whereas if you'd started with your base, you know, at this point, you'd be removing a lot of your hard work. A little tip for you at home, one of my favorite things is just a cotton bud with a flat tip, wrap it in a face wipe, and then you have an instant and quick way to clean the under eye area. Now we're starting to work on Lotte's base, but before I do that, what I always like to do is just go back in and reapply some more of the facial oil, because I really, even though we want a flawless finish, we want it to be as sheer as possible. And I find by just popping a little bit more oil on, it really just sort of shears out the foundation. And gives us, you know, a finish where we can still see some of the skin. And it's also very luminous and glowing. Now we're going to start working on giving Lotte a flawless base. I'm working with my favorite foundation, which has been in my kit for years. It's the Estee Lauder Double Wear Light. Again, I like to apply the product to the back of my hand initially, using a natural bristled foundation brush or cream emollient product brush. And then I just start on the forehead, really buffing it into the skin, you know, circular patting motions to begin with. Starting on the forehead, look up for me, you know, either side of the nose. And if you need to use your finger, really blend that. So what I've done is mix 2 shades on the back of my hand. We've got 1 and 0.5, which are the 2 lightest shades. So initially, we'll get this, apply it all over Lotte's face to give us the base. And then I may come back in, you know, a little bit later on and use the lighter shade through the T-zone to give us a bit of natural contour. Sometimes what I like to do is I switch brushes. This is the Charlotte Tilbury powder and sculpt brush, which I love. Look up for me. And I really just polish that into the skin. The first brush is great for getting the initial amount of product you need on, but I find this brush, which is just a little bit less dense, really gives you the polish to the skin that you want. So for me, it's always super important, just lift a little bit, to really make sure that you continue applying the foundation under the jawline and down the neck. This will also be really helpful when we come back in a minute and do the contouring. So Lotte is blessed with youth and obviously well rested. So today I'm not going to be using a traditional under eye concealer, but if at home you do need something with a little bit more coverage, it's really fantastic. Look out for me. You know, you've got some cream under eye, you've got sticks, you've got, you know, more opaque products that will help cover any areas you need to. But what I'm using is Tom Ford Illuminating Highlighting Pen, just coming in right under the eye here and then doing a little crisscross motion here, which I find once you blend it really adds a beautiful highlight to the high plane of that cheekbone. So just softly blending out with a little fluffy brush here. And then I'll actually switch back to the brush that I used to polish the foundation, and we'll just use that on this area here. So next we're going to move on to contouring Lotte's face, but what I always like to do first is just do a light dusting of pressed powder on the areas that we're going to be contouring. It's really just to help avoid getting any grab from the contour and making sure that the color we get is completely even. Making sure that you come under the jawline because we will be contouring here also. Now my favorite contour palette is one by Smashbox. I love this because it comes with 3 great colors that you can mix together. I do personally tend to just use the 2 sort of taupey neutral tones and a great angled blusher brush. So mixing the 2 products together, then using the back of your hand to just remove any excess powder you don't need. I find the easiest way to work out the placement for contour is I get my client to suck on their cheeks. Great, thank you, Lotte. And then this just allows you to see where you want to start applying it under the cheekbone. So we've loaded the brush with product and then we're really just working it in under the cheekbone and then turning the angle on the brush and sweeping in an upwards motion to the middle of the face. And if you need a bit more product, just load the brush, take the excess off, and again, just start building that. Bringing it up into the temple area in a lovely big C shape. So once we've got the shape and the contour on the cheeks looking great, we want to come in and just do a little bit of work under the jawline, down the sides of the nose. So if you just lift a little for me, Lotte, coming in here, using the same brush, just with a little bit less product under the jawline. Then I like to swap back to the Giorgio Armani brush we used earlier. This is a clean one, but again, the same shape. So if you look up for me, and just gently dust each side of the nose, the tip here. Just using the residue that you have on the fluffy brush, bring it up and into this corner of the eye, and it will really help. Again, it's just making it completely seamless and flawless. I think a really great way to keep a look like this, which is, you know, it's kind of high octane glamour, to keep it youthful and fresh, is to use a blusher. One of my favorites is this one by Maybelline. It's a cream emollient blush, which gives a really fresh finish to the skin. So I load the brush right out of the container. This is a Chanel brush, which I think is actually designed for setting like face powder and things. But I love it because it's dense enough that it will apply the product where you need it. But you can just fluff it like that to get that very sheer finish to the cheek. And look straight ahead. I personally like to apply the blush higher on the cheekbone and sort of closer to the apple of the cheek, so it really, you know, bounces off the color of Lotte's eyes and just gives maximum impact. So actually, if you can look up for me, and starting gently here and then working softly out. So we're nearly finished the look. The last 2 stages is we're going to go in and just do a little bit of spot concealing on any blemishes, any areas of redness. I'm using the Laura Mercier Secret Camouflage palette, which I love. And it's just, this is a natural fiber brush with a very fine pointed tip. And we're just going to go in and just conceal on the spot where we need to. I like to go around the face first and do all the little spots before I blend it. So just stippling on the areas where we need. If you have an area that's a little bit bigger, I apply to my finger and just press pat into there. And then to blend the edges, just using a fluffy brush. And you can also just stipple a little bit extra around the edges. So whilst I always think there's a place for a red lip, and I think it amps up any beauty look, today I just want to soften this. We're going to keep it really natural, really fresh. So what I'm going to do is apply one of my other favorites, Lucas Purple Ointment, and also then just fill the lips using MAC Boldly Bare, which is the perfect color to just trace the outline of the lip and make it look a little bit fuller. So I go in with the purple first, just tighten for me. Apply that to the lips, and I just like to trace the very outline here. A little bit more in the corners, and again on the top lip. And really just finger pat that into the lip so it almost looks like her natural lip colour. So day to day, I think this lip is absolutely perfect, but if you're wanting to just give it something a little bit added extra for maybe the evening, or if you're going from the office to after work drinks, this is another one of my favourite products. It's by Sicily. It's called Phyto Lip Star in White Diamond. And what I love to do is just apply it straight from the brush. Tighten your top lip and relax a bit, and just apply it top of that Cupid's bow and a tiny bit on the bottom lip. And if you rub together, and then again just finger pat that in, and it just gives a beautiful soft lacquered finish. So for the final finish and polish to the look, I always give a light dusting of powder through the T-zone, being careful to leave all this beautiful youthful dewiness on the cheekbone. This is the final look. How do you feel, Lotte?
I absolutely love it. It looks amazing. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you to my beautiful model, Lotte, and for you at home watching. I hope you've enjoyed it.